Afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all having a good week. Thursday already. Christ, it's ridiculous. Again, thank you for the support and the posts and the messages and everything else like that. This one's hard. Very, very hard. So I briefly said last time about how this all started for me and how it all began and the impact on my childhood and how I didn't really understand what was happening with me. Well, this one's a bit different because I got a diagnosis and I started to understand exactly what was wrong with me. So as I got into adulthood, obviously I started to have more responsibilities and things like that. I worked in a shop. I was a manager of a shop. I had keys to lock the shop up, and like I said on the video the other day, securing things was always a massive concern. So I always remember locking the shop and then having to go back and check the shop was locked, to then walk back and check the shop was locked again, and suddenly have a panic that my train was late. And this is all still before camera phones, or certainly before camera phones like they are now. So I couldn't just snap a picture or take a picture of me holding the doors. I'll come on to more of that in a minute. But yeah, so this was now starting to impact my professional life more than I can ever tell you or anything. So I'd lock the shop up, I'd put the key in, I'd lock the door, and I'd sit there, and my hand, it would be physically like my hand couldn't let go of the handle of the door, because if I did, I would automatically feel that was unsecure. And not only with the doors, I had the safe of the shop, I had everything. It wasn't just a door. I had to, again, lights turned off, switches turned off, shutters being down. And this is just what I remember from one store. But I remember my hand physically being stuck. Physically, could not remove it from the door. My brain was telling me it wasn't locked, when it obviously was, but my hand couldn't move, and it physically couldn't move it. And then it progressed. So then one day I got home, and I didn't understand what was happening. There was something I couldn't get out of my head that this door wasn't locked, and somehow I remember getting to sleep despite crying all night and everything like that. And then not so long after that, I got a phone call at work that my then partner called me and then said that the shower had leaked and it was coming through the ceiling. So I got home, and absolutely the shower had leaked, gone through the light, it hit this, it had come through and it was dripping through. This was the beginning of 2 years of the hardest, well, maybe not the hardest, but one of the hardest periods that I would ever experience, and I ever want to experience in my life. From that point onwards, this condition of where I would check things and it would take a little bit of time took a whole new meaning. So at the time, I was in a job where I would either do an early shift or a late shift. So I think I'd start at 8 or 11, somewhere in between possibly. And I couldn't leave the house. I genuinely couldn't leave the house on my own without having a breakdown. And if anything interrupted me attempting to leave the house, this process would start again, and it would start again. And if the phone would ring, if the postman would come, if someone looked at me weird when I'm trying to lock the door. And this was the most mind-numbing, horrible thing that was so simple. And I'd write it down of an order I'd have to do it in. So it would start with upstairs, there's the bedrooms, moving into the bathroom, the landing. Well, hang on a minute, is the telly off in the bedroom? So we start again, and we go round in a circle, and we just keep going. And we keep going, and we keep going, and we keep going. To a point where I just broke. I absolutely broke. I was glued to the house, being able to leave it on my own. I couldn't leave it. I couldn't leave it because I automatically feared something was going to go wrong, or because a shower had leaked. No one had left the shower on, by the way. It was just a pipe burst. simple thing. But in my head, it was me. This was about 10 years ago now. 9-10 years ago, I'd imagine. And my world changed. I'd always had it. I'd had it for, what's now been found because of reasons. Fair enough. And I remember I found it really hard to speak to people because people would have thought, what the hell's he on about? Of course things are locked and things are secure and all that. But as I can't even tell you how hard this was. I just... And to this day, luckily now we're in a time where we have camera phones so I can check things. But there are numerous images on my phone. The number's 12 at the moment, so if I leave anywhere on my own, I have to check things. I have to check 12 times. But only in my own home, which is just bizarre, isn't it? It's just bizarre. But I think the worst it got was 3.5 hours to 4 hours of me checking this house. So if you can imagine getting up in the morning, getting ready for work, and then spending the next 3 hours, 4 hours checking the whole house. And whatever your head told you, and whatever your mind told you, of course it's locked, it's shut, it's closed, it's switched off. The telly's obviously not on, you're looking at it. Your mind was not accepting that. And it was a vicious circle of going round and round. And I just couldn't handle it. I just couldn't. I didn't know what was happening. My mind had gone, my head had gone, my life had gone, and no one could understand it. And it got so bad that if I was starting work on a late shift, so say 11:30, something like that, I'd be working till 8. I'd be in work at 8 o'clock, so I'd leave the same time as my then partner, so I just wouldn't have to do it, therefore turning my day into, instead of a normal 8-hour day, a 12-hour day, because I would rather sit there and do nothing and not get paid in the office than have to cope with this. And for 2 years it took, 2 solid years it took to get any kind of answers, any kind of diagnosis, any kind of help. I was called some of the worst names. I was laughed. I was mocked. And I don't want that for anyone else. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for people who struggle. And it's not funny. I said in my first video that it's crippling, and I mean crippling. And it altered my life. And even now, as a 40-year-old, I've lived with this for over 30 years. And I always wonder if I'm there checking the door and people are walking past thinking, is he trying to break in? Is he trying to unlock a lock? I don't know. But it's got to a point where I don't care. So this one is hard. Because my world was hard. My world then altered. I was having nightmares about things going wrong. I was dreaming things. I was having thoughts. It was just awful. And all I'm going to say is that if you see anyone struggling or anyone is finding things difficult, or if you are finding things difficult, then please talk. Please. As I've said, my messages are open. I live it every day, so I'm happy to talk, and I have coping mechanisms now, which we'll come on to in later videos, I'm sure. But every day is hard. Every day is a battle. I call it an OCD cycle. The counsellors have told me that I need to break that cycle. I don't know where to start, to be honest. And I apologise for getting upset, but when someone says OCD, and a lot of it is said is, I've got an OCD because I like to scrub my kitchen floor, I like to, hoover the sofa every day. Please don't call it an OCD or joke about it, because it's not. It's not. An OCD is something that alters your life. It changes your life and it makes your life miserable. And there is no cure. There is no help. You can have counselling, you can have CBT, you can talk to people, but there's no cure. Some days it will be good, some days it will be bad. But for 2 years I lived that until I got some 2 years every day of trying to battle that thought. It was exhausting both mentally and physically. And I apologise for getting upset, but just thinking about those times and the names that I was called and laughed at was just awful. So I want these videos for people, you know, so people can get help. And if people need help, they can talk to people. It doesn't have to be me, God no. But just talk to people, talk to your loved ones. And I promise you it won't be as bad as they think. Anyway, thanks again for listening. And we'll catch up probably next week now. And thank you so much for all the comments and the likes and all things like that. I'm not going to take over YouTube with this or anything like that. I'm not going to be the biggest, you know, obviously the biggest amount of subscribers. I'm not going to have that, but just one person is all I want to do. Have a good weekend, guys, when we get there, and we'll speak next week.